The Digital Circles Podcast, giving a voice to Northern Ireland's business network. Brought to you by Private Label People. With your host, Paul Mooney.
On today's podcast, I'm joined by former professional footballer Michael Carvill. Michael started his career at Charlton Athletic before returning to the Irish League. He won 5 league titles with Linfield and Crusaders alongside multiple Irish Cups. He is currently player manager with Kilmore Rec and coach educator for the Irish Football Association. Deciding all of that wasn't enough, Michael recently created the Professional Footballers Association Northern Ireland. We sat down to speak to him about his career in football and how it shaped his vision for the PFA Northern Ireland. You're a busy man, so we've managed to pull you into the office here and get you sat down on the microphone. But you're still playing a bit. You're managing currently with Kilmore. How's your season going?
Yeah, at the minute we're mid-season, I suppose. We'll come to the end. In terms of the league, we've still got a bit of work to do. We've had been very unfortunate with a few injuries and different things. Currently, we're in the quarter-final of the Clarence Cup, so we've got a game to look forward to, potentially against Crumlin United or Green Island. And in terms of the league, it's still all to play for. We've obviously got ourselves a bit of work to do, but we're delighted with the way things are going. And obviously the new pitch coming along as well is a massive boost for a club like Kilmore Rec. So it's really enjoyable, and I'm loving every minute of it. Good.
You're building a good sense of community down there. I know there's some investment coming in for the pitch, so that's great for Crossgar.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you look at Crossgar, it's been probably deprived of any good facilities in a while, and in terms of when you're obviously managing the club and you see all the kids coming up and turning up to train the wet nights, they've obviously got a facility now that they can train on all year round. The local community can benefit, and obviously for Kilmore Rec Football Club, it's massive. It's absolutely massive, and it's great to be a part of.
Absolutely. Well, congratulations on that. I hope it continues to go really well for you, and you're not under too much pressure as manager.
You're always under pressure as manager. You're always.
Yeah, absolutely. You're now at the latter stages of your career. I hope you don't mind me pointing out, but inevitably your thoughts might turn to what you might do after you retire from playing. Do you think that was in the back of your mind when you first established the PFA?
Probably not me personally. I never looked at it as a Michael Carvill project, so to speak, or anything like that. It was kind of, this is needed. The PFA is needed for all the players. And it always irked me that we didn't have anything. We just didn't have that arm to support us. And there was nothing worse than somebody coming into the dressing room and saying, "Oh, I got something from the PFA in England," because for the rest of the players in the change room, they almost felt like, "Oh, that's good for you, but what about us? We get nothing." So I think the project with PFA was a wee bit more, everybody talked about it, everybody wanted it, it had been tried before. I think to me it was just more of a challenge to say, right, how can we make it happen? How can we get every player something that they can benefit from, like the English PFA? I think that's where it all started, and it hasn't stopped really since that day. We started planning it. I think I mentioned on the launch night. It was back in 2000, potentially 17, 18, when the first email was sent, and it's still in the building process now. So it's been a lot of hard work, but enjoyed every minute of it.
Good. Well, it's already making a difference, and you can see that on the ground with the players and the people you're talking to. When Linfield brought you back from Wrexham as a young player, 2008. How do you feel the Irish League has changed since you first made your debut in it back then?
I suppose when I came back to Linfield, it was we didn't have the new national football stadium at Windsor Park. It wasn't as grand as that. It was the old Windsor that was special in its own way. It had a lot of character about it. The league was trying to go full time back then. With that current Linfield crop, I think we had 7 players potentially. I think it was myself, Alan Mannis, Michael Gold, Billy Joe Burns, Robert Garrett, kind of involved in it. And it was very difficult for the Linfield board and the committee to justify it being full time, and there was only 7 players. You look at the league now, and there's you're 4 teams, 3 or 4 teams that are full time. Then there's a hybrid model. My argument now for the other teams within the league who are probably training just as much, how can you argue that they're not pushing full time as well? Because they're giving up probably Tuesday night, Thursday night, the odd Monday night. They're playing midweek most weeks, and they're also doing extra gym work away from the club as well. So to me, it's already tipped towards a full time league. It's just now obviously about how we manage it and how we progress it forward. So in comparison, that's the difference. In terms of the players I played with, I was very lucky, obviously coming through at Linfield and then Crusaders and then obviously finally at Dungannon. The quality was always in the Irish League. I think now with and I have to give credit to Niffle for their marketing of the league. There's more exposure to it on social media. The Friday night games, I enjoy watching the Friday night games now more than some Premier League games or some Championship games. If a Championship game in England was on, and you could watch Linfield v Larne or Linfield Glentoran or Cliftonville Dungannon on a Friday night, you tune in and watch the match on the Friday night. There's something about it. It's more enjoyable to watch. So in terms of the product and what they're producing, it's getting better. The facilities are obviously better. You look across the 3G pitches all within the league now. So hopefully it just continues to grow from strength to strength and get more professional. And a target for the league has to be to challenge in the League of Ireland, because I think currently we're ranked 42 in terms of the coefficient, and the League of Ireland's 35. I watched clips of their games the other night actually, and it was incredible when you seen the Bohemians scoring around the length of the pitch and the fans and the atmosphere and things like that. So I think it's improved massively. I still think there's still room for improvement, but
yeah, well, you can definitely see. I mean, anybody that watches Irish League football can see there's been a rise in the standards, whether it's fitness or whether it's ability. But with that standard rising, do you feel that leads to more expectation of the players?
I think in society in general now, I think it's like a fishbowl. We're just open to criticism with social media, with camera phone, with obviously phones. The players are obviously being watched regularly now, so they can't do anything. Back when I was playing, there was nights out you could go on or stag do's and you were safe. It was only the players in the team that were there. Nowadays, players have to be very careful because fans are out with their phones on the weekends, and one wrong word, it's put on social media, it's shared in a WhatsApp group, and it goes throughout the whole league within about 3 minutes. So there is now more pressure on the players to be more professional in terms of they have to be careful how they behave off the pitch, and how that could actually affect their career, which is sad as well, because you make a mistake off the pitch, as a lot of young players will. You know, sometimes that go against you in terms of obviously a club signing you or potentially a move to England potentially as well. So for me, there's obviously that added pressure on the players, which I believe then entitles them to more support that they never had before, because with that level of detail now and attention on them, that they need maybe a wee bit of education and a wee bit further support of how to manage their social media accounts and things like that, and things they should be doing and not doing, and how they behave as well. So it's a learning curve for everybody, I think.
Well, obviously there are some key concerns that you would have there around the players, and I take it that shaped your work within the PFA Northern Ireland and the people that you've spoken to try and wrap that support network around it.
Yeah, I think if you go back to the very essence of the PFA, the first thing that always springs out of my mind is player wellbeing, health and wellbeing. Was always, how do we protect those players that are in trouble? How do we give them that extra layer of support that they need, that they maybe can't get from general society? Because obviously as footballers, they were under a contract, they had to turn up every week, they needed support, but they couldn't necessarily reach out to anybody because in fear of someone finding out or losing their position on the team or anything like that, and that could potentially end their time at the club. So that was what it was all built around. I think from there, it's just manifested into everything really. And I think the biggest thing for me that I've learned whilst on this journey was, at the start I wanted to fix the world. I wanted to do everything. Now we've broke it down to 3 key pillars: advice, guidance, and obviously well-being. So we're and protecting the players. So we're always looking at how do we work from there. Once we get that right, I believe everything else will look after itself. I think at the start I was trying to sign deals with ProDirect, trying to get everything for the players and offer everything and make it the best thing in the world. I couldn't say no to it. But then I think now, as I've matured into the role, I understand what the players really want and really need, more importantly than the fancy things that are the perks and things like that. It's the actual advice, support and guidance, which is, you can't put money on it, to be honest, in terms of how important it is.
Yeah, of course. And it's one thing that, you know, you talk about they're trying to build things like discounts for players, maybe through ProDirect, as you mentioned, and players might think that that's what they need right now, but actually they need other things. and sometimes players aren't best placed to know what they are, and particularly after they retire. How much of your work is going into ensuring players are looked after once they finish playing football as well as the now?
Yeah, I think with the post-career support, it starts now for the players. I think it's that initial conversation when we go into the change room and you're sitting there with, say, 25 players. Somebody in that room, I think we had one last night actually at a club, might reach out to a PFA member and say, look, I'd like to get involved. I'd like to help. I work in this area. I'd like to provide support. By them doing that, they're automatically thinking about what they're going to be doing after their career. And I think a lot of players do. I think there's this myth that footballers are just focused on their football. They don't care. I think every day they care, but they just don't know what's best or where to go. So in terms of what we do is kind of like get that informal discussion going. What is it you want to do? What is it you'd like to do? And then kind of try and encourage them to upskill themselves whilst they're playing. So then when it comes to the end, they're not starting at the bottom. I always kind of felt sorry because when I obviously went into the office for the first time through my role with the Irish FA, I kind of thought, this is not as frightening as you first think. You know what I mean? You learn, and obviously the Irish FA were very supportive and educated us and trained us in different areas. But I think players sometimes have an initial fear that they don't belong working in that kind of job, where I'm kind of going, yes, you can work at this kind of level, you can do different jobs. It's just trying to help them get away from this mindset that they can't do it. And I think education is key. So the likes of Open University, Ulster University and Queen's obviously as well, and different programmes. Our role as the PFA is to open up as many doors as we can. Now, not every player is going to walk through them doors, but if a majority of them think about it, or they try to, or they attempt it, I think then we've done our role.
Yeah, definitely. And you yourself played across the water, and then you moved back here. Is there a time in your career and your own personal development whenever you actually remember you needed the help of the PFA at the time in England, as you remember of that?
I remember it very, very well. I think it was when I first seen how much the university courses were costing and everything that went with it, and the expectancy on terms of time and commitment to a degree. Obviously, when I returned home, I think I was 20, 21, 22 potentially. I didn't have any educational backgrounds. I did my GCSEs when I left. Went to England. We did a course which materialised didn't offer you any support or anything. It was just a kind of like one of them degrees you do that doesn't really add value to what you need to achieve. So I had to start at the very bottom and start at Ulster University. And I think at that moment, walking into a night lecture, I think it was a Monday evening from 4 to 9, because I had to do a part-time with the football. I think that's when it really hit home to me, like, this is going to be a long journey. So I think I almost spent 4 or 5 years in university through, had to do a part-time degree, foundation degree, and then obviously achieve an honours degree, which was a long time. There was times during it I thought, no, this is not working. I was rushing home, obviously, getting trained, going to football. Obviously, we weren't earning massive amount of money in the Irish League. I don't think anybody can come around and say they're going to earn enough money that they can retire one day. That's being realistic, nowhere near it. So I think that stress of trying to get the education and then trying to play and perform, because the league was getting better. And obviously when you're at clubs like Linfield and Crusaders, there's no drop-off point. At the end of every season, you could be released, you could be let go, there's other players coming in. So the PFA in England were super. They put my mind at ease. They educated me on what support was there in terms of grants, funding. And the thing I liked about it the most was they didn't just give you a pot of gold and say, go and do whatever you want. You started the course, and if you didn't finish the course, you didn't receive any funding or support. So that was always in the back of your minds in terms of, I've started this now. If I work towards this and finish it, I'm going to get support from the PFA. So that was a kind of like a carrot. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it kind of made you be a bit more enthusiastic and keen to complete it, to have it. And looking back now, it was the best thing I did. And that's why I think now, with my own experience, it's going into change rooms. And when people come to me, and there's this joke about footballers being stupid, and people can't do their GCSEs, and they wouldn't belong in university and stuff like that. I'm trying to tackle all that and trying to say, look, just step in the classroom, have a go. We'll support you. And we will. If you need help around anything, we'll support you. And I think that is where we bring value in terms of trying to get people to step foot in the education circle. Because see, nowadays, with the beauty of Open University, You can do your degree at any time you want. You can study at any time you want. It's so flexible. So it's just trying to encourage players, and that's what we do in the change rooms. We try and encourage them to start thinking. And to be fair to the clubs as well, that we obviously visited a few clubs, they're also thinking like that as well. How do we better educate our players so that when it does come to the finished playing, they have a career?
Yeah, and you're living embodiment of that, of being able to divide your time and to be able to do a degree, and it's shaped where you are now, and being able to be leading the PFA forward. In terms of the PFA getting support from other organisations, the likes of Northern Ireland Football League, do you work hand in hand with them? What other organisations do the PFA work with to wrap support around the services they offer?
Yeah, so obviously within the PFA, just to provide a bit more detail on the structure, obviously there's a management committee. So there's myself, Stephen Lowry, the current Korean player, is the chairperson. We have Julie Nelson, Michael Ward, Helen McKenna, Cara Hamilton, Mark Patton, Andrew Mitchell, and I hope I haven't forgotten anyone.
Don't forget anyone.
I haven't forgotten anybody. I did mention Cara Hamilton, obviously, yeah. So, no, we have a strong management committee, and we work closely with NIFL, and Jared Lawler has been very supportive. And Jared's the first to say that there will be times that we will clash, obviously. But our main focus is obviously building stronger relationships with the governing bodies, so that when it comes to times that we need to make change or enhance professionalism within the league, we can add our support to that. So the likes of NIFL, the Irish FA, obviously, who the elephant in the room is obviously who I am currently employed with. So obviously that works and it has its advantages and disadvantages. An advantage being obviously I know the people within the Irish FA, I know how it's run and organised, and I couldn't speak highly enough how it is run and organised. Obviously, from my own role, that when I'm doing this voluntarily for the PFA, sometimes people think I'm working for the Irish FA when I'm not. It's completely separate, so it's done on my own time. But the most important thing is that we have the respect of the governing bodies, and I think that's built through dialogue, trust, and how we present ourselves. Because if we weren't presenting ourselves professionally, then we wouldn't get the respect of the governing bodies that in Northern Ireland, obviously. To add further to that, then we are constantly being reviewed by the world governing body for all players' unions, who's FIFPro. Mm-hmm. So our relationship with them is so important, and they were recently over in Belfast visiting us as well. So as a voluntary committee, we're all working full time, and we're all trying our very best to provide support for the players. We're also under a lot of pressure as well in terms of we're being watched, and we need to make sure that when we are being watched, that we are showing our best side, and we're representative of all the male and female players in the leagues, because it's not about the management committee, it's not about an individual, it's about the collective, and that's the only way the union will work. So it's so important that whilst we're representing ourselves, that we obviously do it professionally and in a way that's representative of all the players in the league. Yeah,
and some of the people you mentioned there in the management committee, there's a wealth of experience there and very diverse. When you're obviously talking to young players nowadays, you've got the benefit of experience. You went across, you were at Charlton when you were a young lad, and then you were at Wrexham. What can a young person expect when they go across the water from a club? Because I'm sure they feel, quite excited by that prospect, but there's another side of that you probably have to speak to the players about in terms of things that they need to be wary of and they need to think about leaving their family whenever they're young.
Yeah, it's actually, going back to a previous question, you talked about maybe the reason why we started. I think that might have been actually a seed of mine in my mind at the very start, was the difficulty that it is for a young player to leave Northern Ireland, move to England or Scotland, and try and become a professional footballer. People don't realise what it's like, and until you've walked that path, you can't talk about that path, if that makes any sense. Agents and intermediaries now involved in the game obviously want to get players across the water. It's obviously more lucrative. It's bigger clubs, more chance of earning more money. For me, it comes down to the player itself, because I remember being that 16-year-old sitting in London on a Friday night and all my mates were back home having the best time ever, and I remember just sitting there feeling this horrible sickness feeling in the pit of your stomach around homesickness and missing out on life. Whereas I probably wasn't missing out much back home, but it felt like that to me at the time, and it wasn't a very enjoyable experience. And you were going into full-time training, you were training every day, the expectancy levels, it was very difficult, it was so challenging. We didn't, as the locals, obviously, I think looking back, it would have been great to have a PFA, but somebody could have come over and visited us in England and supported us and spoke to us and took us out for lunch. I was very lucky that there was some families from friends locally that took me out at weekends as well, just to break the cycle. But you just live in this 24/7 football lifestyle, and it's not like, you know, I mean, the football lifestyle that everyone thinks. I was earning like £80 a week, and by the time you left your digs and went out and bought a few things, got your bus to the training ground every day and stuff like that, it was challenging. Now, it was a great learning, but nowadays our education for young players is you're moving to England. It's not glamorous. When you're on trial, I was very fortunate to go on trial to most clubs as well. You're treated like a king. You're brought all the nicest places. The club looks amazing. The staff are lovely all the time. But see, once you sign, you move over, you're now in direct competition with about 20 other players who have probably been at the club since they've been 8 or 9 years of age. They don't want an Irish boy coming in and taking their place. It's common sense. I wouldn't want them, if I was over here and a player moved over from England, I wouldn't want them to come over and take my place. So instantly you're in an environment where you probably don't have any friends, but you have a lot of competition and a lot of people looking for that place. So I think that's one thing that we're trying to improve. And I think the JD Academy is doing a great job of that with the Irish FA in terms of preparing them for that lifestyle, preparing them for what it's really like when they land over in England. The return home rate is ridiculously high. I think there was a book documented about it recently. I think I was in it as well, as field footballers that returned home. But it's ridiculously high, and obviously we want to encourage them to stay across in England as long as we can. But there's that reality piece, and I delivered a piece to the JD Academy about what it was really like for me. Now, this might not be everyone's experience, but I delivered what it was like for me around the homesickness and how difficult it was, and moving cities and different cultures and different lifestyles. It was a big shock. But I think parents need advice on this as well. I think parents have a massive part. Agents, obviously, as well, and something we want to do through the PFA is if you want to representation, the PFA in Northern Ireland will represent you for any move across the water free of charge, no charge whatsoever to the players. Whereas if an agent sometimes takes a player across, it might be, yeah, we'll do it for free of charge as well, but once you turn 18, you're with us now, aren't you, kind of thing, and that kind of pressure. I don't think a player probably needs that pressure at that young age. You know what I mean? I think they need to just support, they need advice. The one and the parents only care about is their safety. We have actually a situation with a player across in England at the minute where they've moved across and the accommodation's not right and things like that. And see, when you hear that side of things, nobody talks about that. Nobody ever hears them stories. It's only about the Connor Bradleys or the Johnny Evanses or the ones that go across, and it's fantastic. They don't hear the stories about when it goes wrong. Yeah. And I think our job then is when it does go wrong, can we help them firstly? Can we help them get their feet back in the ground and stay in England? If they return home, can we support them so when they come home, it's not a big culture shock? Because that's what I struggled with, was the feeling of rejection and coming back home when everybody said, oh, you're going to be a professional footballer, you're going to earn loads of money, you're going to be buying us houses here, there and everywhere, you're going to, and all this, and you actually come home and you see them on the street and you're actually embarrassed to look towards them because you feel like you failed, kind of thing. So it's that bringing them home, trying to get them back into society and getting them, most importantly, back playing as well, because a lot of players come home and just throw the head up. Whereas I think now, come back, the Irish League's a good league, or the League of Ireland, or there's opportunities to travel to America, Australia, and go and have a education in a different country as well. So our job is to help them get back on their feet, but also the feeling of rejection that could affect their mental health and well-being. Can we help the players around it?
Yeah, it's a lot to go through at a young age to feel that you've just described really, really well there. That pressure, and then that feeling that you've let people down whenever you come back, and it's not something I think most people really think about when they think about players playing professionally and semi-professionally. Is there a better alternative now when you're a young kid and you're thinking about what you want to do in your career than what there was for you in terms of, the Irish League now has more full-time clubs, there's better facilities for training, etc. Do you feel now it's perhaps maybe in a player's interest to stay playing for a local team a bit longer than going over to England and really concentrating on trying to get their as quickly as possible? Does it build them physically and mentally, the league that we have here?
Absolutely. I think the proof's in the pudding with your Stuart Dalls, Gavin White, Trey Hume. You could go on through the list of players that have went
Terry Devlin.
Terry Devlin. I think Gareth McCauley is probably another example of that as well in that team. There's certain players that at 16 years of age, and I was lucky, Johnny Evans, I was in the same age bracket as Johnny Evans. Johnny Evans could have went away at 12 at any age. I think he moved across when he was 14 potentially. Johnny was always ready. There's other players that maybe aren't ready, but the clubs sign them anyway, hoping that they do fulfil their potential. But I think now within the Irish League, with the TV exposure, with the games, with the scouting network, there is more opportunities for our players to go across late. I think Trey Hume's a great example, a perfect example. It's fresh in my mind right now. Do you know what I mean? I remember him down. I used to drive into Windsor, and he was always in the football. I think it was the football management company, and he was training every day, and he was doing his education, and he just kept going. And he built the resilience. Then he got into the Linfield first team, and then he worked really, really hard. Then he stood out, and now look at him now. He got that move. So the beauty of it is now, if you don't move away, there used to be this fear factor. If you don't move at 16, that's you. You're in the Irish League. You'd be very lucky. You know, I mean, you should be grateful that you're in the Irish League, but you're definitely not going to move to England. That's changed now, as well. So now, obviously, the clubs are saying, the Irish League clubs are saying, stay with us. We can obviously provide good football for you, opportunities to play in Europe through obviously the Champions League qualification and the Europa League. But also, I think what needs to change is the respect, and this is where I agree with the clubs, that like our league now, clubs in England can't just turn around and say, can we take him over for a trial? I think that's ludicrous, as if to say, look, we'll just take him and have a look at him, or our young girl as well, for that matter. Can we just bring him over and have a look? I think now, obviously, it has to be respected from England that our league's obviously professional. They're signing professional contracts, and if you want that player to go across, you have to make an offer or sign that player. You can't just expect now that these players are going to jump out of an Irish League club and just go to England. So it's kind of that respect where it works both ways. But definitely for the players with the facilities and the access to the strength and conditioning, and obviously the managers, the culture within the Irish League's changed a wee bit now. It's flipped a wee bit more with this full-time professional setup, that they're actually getting better opportunities to play senior football at a younger age, and the level is very, very good. So to me, it's a win-win for everybody involved now.
Yeah, that's evidence again. Somebody like Conor McManaman had probably got to a stage in his career where he maybe thought that had passed, but it shows the level of the Irish League that actually he was obviously one of the best players in the Irish League, but he's gone to Scotland and he's doing really, really well with St Mirren and he's flying. So again, that's further evidence. In terms of the women's game, obviously there's been a fantastic upsurge in attendances, especially in the international games. How great's that to see? And you know, you must see that on the ground when you're talking to young female players. The excitement's there. I mean, I know you spoke to a few recently, and the buzz they get out of playing for their club, but then also some of them playing for their country as well.
I think, obviously looking back, I think it was obviously Kenny Shields' involvement with the women's national team. I think that was the start of the wave. Obviously the qualification, and then obviously I think Tanya's obviously came in now as well, and there's a real good buzz about women's football in Northern Ireland. I think what we have to try and do, obviously through the PFA, is kind of help shape that. I think the league has tried to introduce obviously the professional aspect of contracts, which is good in essence, that it's trying to professionalise the league and it's trying to be better. I think our role that we can see issues around it is that I think it's just not the norm for female players to sign contracts. So, and what they think is just normal in terms of maybe their freedom to move clubs and their freedom to miss training and things like that. There, once you sign an employment contract with a club now, you have to train, you have to play, and things like that. So there's a bit of education around that locally, and then also what's worked really well, I think, is that current players are doing really well in the women's Premiership. So clubs in England are now taking our best girls across England, which is fantastic. But I think it's also, again, similar to the men, it's that education about moving across to England, what it's like for a female player. We have had a few issues around that as well, for maybe it's a shock to the system when they move across to full-time football in England, and obviously the women's game is growing significantly. But again, the investment in obviously salaries and things like that are not up to the comparison. Obviously, as a male player, maybe moving across to professional club in England as well. So it's trying to support the girls a wee bit better around contracts and what they expect when they sign their contracts. But there's nobody that can argue that with the Northern Ireland Football League and their marketing of the women's game, and obviously the standard of it as well, and obviously the different clubs that have done really, really well, it's trying to just help it grow and continues to grow. It's obviously very disappointing that one team dropped out this year and it's now down to 9 teams. But I think the most important thing for us is that all the girls as members, that we provide support to them and advice to them and guidance to them, and we have the best people speaking to them about what they expect within the women's game, because there is opportunity now there for a full-time career for our female players, which probably wasn't there 5-10 years ago. That it was. I know Julie Nelson speaks about it as well. She wishes to start her career now, that rather than 10 years ago, because the opportunities for them is brilliant, and that's super. Our job then is to obviously make sure that those opportunities are safe, and we can support the players for making that transition into full-time football or moving across to England as well.
Yeah, and it's crazy how something starts and then it filters down. I mean, you know, my wee girl recently has just really taken a massive interest in football, and I don't think that would have happened but for the interest, you know, that's been around, particularly international team and qualifying for a major tournament, and now you're seeing more and more figures in the game that even she would recognise now as female footballers. So it's brilliant, the effect that it's had right through down into grassroots, as you would say.
Absolutely. I look at obviously Cara, who's on our committee as well. Obviously when she joined the committee, she was still playing for Glentoran. She's now across in England. Social media, seen a post she put up the other night. Obviously young girls looking at that going, there's a role model, there's something I can achieve, I could do that. I think obviously years ago maybe they didn't have that. They didn't have that, their role model or someone to look at where they could potentially aspire to be like. So I think it's great now that I think the international team maybe raised the bar. I think the clubs are now raising their standards, and I think it's getting better. Our job again, like the men's league as well, is just to help it and support it, to try and make it as professional as it can be. And my argument around that is that I think it's something like 55 other nations around the world all have players' unions. We didn't have any support previously, so now we have our support in place. So that's helped the male and female players in our country, like every other nation in Europe and the world. Definitely.
You spoke briefly on contracts a moment ago, and there was talk of a wage cap recently being introduced. Where does the PFANI stand on that?
I think initially when the news first broke, there was a misunderstanding. I think the wage cap almost felt like it was players could only earn this amount of money, and that's the maximum ceiling that they can get. Obviously, if that was the case, I think the PFA, along with FIFPro and probably other PFAs, would have been completely against that. I think in any walk of life, to say that players can only earn X amount of money and this is what they're all on would not be fair and wouldn't be not humane. And I think a lot of challenges in courts throughout Europe prove this, that you can't just, cut this off. Obviously, some leagues did try and introduce it. But I think when speaking about it, and this is the beauty of dialogue and talking about it, if it is going to change, we want to protect the players. So the clubs have to be savvy with how they use their expenditure. So I think there was a discussion around like a 70%, 30% model on income, and they can spend on different areas based on basically a financial audit of each club. I personally, and obviously this is up for the members, would be in agreement with that, because what we don't want to do is have clubs overspend and then all of a sudden then everybody loses because the clubs can't continue to grow or develop. Then the players will eventually not get paid anyway because the money pot will seize up. So we have to make it so it's a sustainable model, and that comes from obviously good planning, good discussions, a strong committee, a club that can think outside the box and look at different ways of increasing their revenue. And I think there has been some great examples in the Irish League of that in the last 5 years, and some clubs that are now trying that model and not reliant on core funding. But most importantly for me is that if a salary cap just where it puts all players on a blanket is not the answer, and it never will be the answer. It might sound like a quick fix at the time, but that would never work. So I think the different model around how much you can spend on percentage of how much you make is a lot better and a lot more reflective of what's fair and just right in the game.
Yeah, no, you're completely right in what you're saying, and it's a fact now that as a manager of a club, you're having to look at these things yourself, expenditure, etc.
The beauty of amateur league is nobody is paid. Obviously, at Kilmore and it's they play for the love of the club, and that to me is what I do. I think when I decided to step away from the Irish League and obviously go back and help my grassroots club, my boyhood club was Kilmore, the club I follow, and it's probably the only club I ever will manage at that level in that area, because my love for the club is so much. That's a different element that you miss as well. It's the boys that turn up every week, training on Tuesday and Thursday, playing on a Saturday and paying their dues. I think it's up around £20 to £30 a month. Do you know what I mean? And buying into their club, and something I respect. It's the love of the game, and we go down and play some nasty games in the amateur league, and we fight. But afterwards, the players walk off the pitch. They sometimes go and have a beer and a joke and a laugh. And I think that essence of the love of the game is still heavily involved in amateur league football in this country, which I love, which I really enjoy, and things like that. So there's obviously the balance. If you want to be a professional player, you have that lifestyle, but obviously if you want to play in the amateur league, I think obviously this idea around paying amateur players is something I do not, and will never happen again at Kilmore or anything like that. So it's important that they understand that the beauty of playing the game is playing for your local club, and you want to represent your local club and play with your friends and enjoy your weekends as well.
Definitely, of course, and you can see that you are enjoying it. It's written all over your face how much you're enjoying it. But you obviously played under some iconic managers, David Jeffrey, Stephen Baxter. Do you have more of an understanding now how difficult it is to manage a club like Stephen Baxter did for 19 years? I know he's coming to the end of his time as Crusaders.
I seen Stephen at Billy Joe Burns' testimonial dinner, and I think that was actually, I had a few drinks with me, I think that was one of the things I said to him, was like, wow, it's incredible of how much time for like a role at Kilmore is spent, around organisation, speaking to players, making sure everything's prepared for the weekend, and dealing with so many different things. It is incredible to think about how you do that every day for the likes of the period of, I think it's you mentioned there, 19 years. Is remarkable, and the sacrifice he must have made with his family and his own children, like bring them up, because at Crusaders, when I was there, obviously we were in Europe, we were away most of the summer, and then once the league started, it was just boom. I remember one year we only had I think it was 4 weeks off at the end of the season, 3 before we had to get back in and prepare for the next season. It's incredible, and that's why I have so much respect for the managers, and that's why I like this role as well, because I think sometimes when people think with the PFA, they're like the horse that comes into the building and wants to take on everybody and say to the clubs, we're here now and we're going to challenge you and we're going to fix it. I think our approach is different. We understand how difficult it is for our clubs. We understand how difficult it is for our managers. And the thing that pleases me the most is when a manager contacts the PFA and asks for support for maybe a player, because I think that shows value, and I think if they recognise it and see it, and all the clubs I've went to, all the managers have been so supportive, probably because they're ex-players.
Former players.
Yeah, and they know the challenges, they know what it's like. So I think that's the key message from that we want to get across, is that we're not here to, go in and shake everything up and attack clubs or anything like that. We're here to support the clubs, support the managers, and most importantly, through doing this, is giving the players the best support that we possibly can.
Absolutely, and I'll just finish off with one last question. What are the key things you're working on currently within the PFA?
I think at the minute the thing that springs to mind is obviously the renegotiation of the standard professional contract for the league. So at the minute that is with NIFL, and they are, and the Irish FA, looking at the terms and conditions of the new contract. We have sent across our proposal and our draft and our thoughts that we think should be included in that. So I'm very interested to see how that goes. That is going to be massive for the league moving forward. As a PFA, that's our time. We've spoke to our players. We have challenged them on what they want and think should be included. And there's obviously a massive discussion around injuries and the cost of injuries, and making sure that there's something in place to protect the players, and I'd be in agreement with that. And how that looks could be different from club to club. But there has to be something that if a player gets injured, they are covered for me, it's a no-brainer. And how we do that at each club will obviously come down to dialogue and discussion. But obviously the contracts are so important for the male and female players moving forward. And if we get that right, it will improve professionalism, it will improve standards, and it will welcome more players to the league. On the back of that, obviously, we're always looking, we've launched our PFA 2-year strategy. So we're always working through that from a management committee of all the different support that we can provide for players around education, mental health and well-being, which will continuously change and develop, because just because we have that now doesn't mean it's just the right fit. There's going to be other stuff that's needed added to that as times change and different areas. So it's constantly evolving. And then obviously, I think most importantly, which is obviously the third and final thing, is speak to the players. Get into the change rooms. We aim to get into the change rooms once or twice a year for each club. And I think if you add that up, it's around 34 clubs across the Nifl Premiership, the Nifl Championship and the Nifl Women's Premiership. We need to be in the change rooms. We need to be speaking to our members. We need to be bringing their voice to the table, because ultimately they are the ones that shape this union, shape the PFA of Northern Ireland. Without their say, there is no union. And I think it's trying to educate them a bit more about that, because I think at the minute it still falls heavily on the management committee to make decisions, and they're happy for that. But we want them to take ownership and really build a strong union, because if they all come together and the solidarity is there, they can have make as much change as they want. They can increase their funding as much as they want. They can really make serious changes to football in this country. So education around that as well. And then obviously with introduction of doping and obviously the gambling restrictions, it's educating all the players around what they can and can't do, and different areas that they need to be concerned about, obviously now with the new measures coming in place. So yeah.
You've a bit to do.
Yeah, this is one thing that's for sure. When I first started, I think somebody once asked me, do you think there's enough work in it? And I thought about it for about 10 seconds and started to, maybe is there? And then now that it's more, we've opened up doors, it's like, wow, this will never end, and there's so much work to be done, but it's enjoyable work. That's something I'm passionate about.
Yeah, well, you can see that you're very passionate about it, and I think a lot of ex-players would congratulate you on starting it, because I think people can see the need for it, and it's been something that's been burning in the background for some time now. I think you said 2018 was initially sort of when the idea came and you really started into it. So I think all the players in the men and women's game will benefit greatly from being a member of the PFA Northern Ireland. You're doing some fantastic work, as I say, and I know a lot of the work you do goes unnoticed due to the code of confidentiality that you have with the players, etc. But I think the message has to be, if somebody needs the PFA that's playing in the leagues that you just mentioned, then they're here for them.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks very much for coming on. It was great to speak to you, and hopefully everything goes well for you in the future.
Thank you very much, Paul. Appreciate it.